Church and your host for this edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. And today our emphasis is upon the Austin Independent School District, the education of our youth, and how their social and emotional needs as well as their intellectual needs are being met. Please join us.
This is Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, welcome to Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Richard Thompson, greeting you, and in behalf of Austin Metropolitan Ministries, glad to have you joining us on this particular episode about the education of our youth in Austin. And in recent years, of course, the system has changed dramatically, as has all over the country. And traditional focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic is also including now meeting the social and emotional needs of young people as well. How that plays out locally and what that means for us here, we have folks to help us understand that. Kathy Ryder, president of the Austin Independent School District, and Eric Gronberg, a graduate of Reagan High School, and we welcome both of you folks.
Good morning.
And would like to have you, Kathy, tell us a little bit about, just to give us a sense of the size and the scope of the district, number of schools, number of students, and so on.
AISD is an urban school district. We have close to 75,000 students at 100 campuses, over 8,500 employees. So it is a big business. We are one of 12 school districts in the greater Austin area. We're one of the largest 8 urban districts in the state of Texas.
Okay, so we're not talking about a small system, but one that's got a good bit of complexity and size to it.
Yes, sir.
And Eric, I think that, do I understand that you started in the system and ended in the system?
Yes.
You've gone all the way through it?
Oh yeah, went to Maplewood Elementary School and Keeling Junior High, and now I'm at Reagan. Or graduated from Reagan now. Hey, I can get to say that.
Right. So I suspect that's fairly rare, isn't it? I mean, with so much turnover in society today, most of the kids that you start out with are still with you, or there have been mostly new people come along?
There are a few that I've gone to elementary school with. I've gone to different schools. The boundaries have changed since I've been in elementary school, and so I was transferred to Reagan. So a lot of my friends have graduated from McCallum or Anderson.
I see.
Some of the other high schools.
So there's been mobility just throughout the district in that regard.
Yeah, the district's changed a little bit.
Well, I think it's the changing of the school system as a whole that has people's interest today, and the name of the game seems to be changed in so many ways, but I'm wondering if there are just certain basic needs that the district recognizes as, in addition to the academic side of things. Would you say that that's the purpose of the system, to help meet some of these other needs?
Well, the mission of AISD is to educate all our students. When you begin to look at what does that mean to help students be successful at their next endeavor, whatever that endeavor may mean. When you have children who come to school who are hungry, who don't have clothes, who aren't sure where their next meal are going to come from, aren't particularly sure who's going to be at the house when they get home, then you've got to pay attention to some of those needs. It is still the responsibility of this district to educate and to pay as much attention to children who come to first grade already reading as to children who come who've never had a story read to them.
So you can't ignore what's going on outside the school as far as what you need to be able to serve them.
Schools are, public school systems are a mirror of our society.
Okay, yeah. So the fact that it is a secular institution, though, I mean, in our country where the separation of church and state is such, we have to be careful to say that this is not for the purpose of meeting the spiritual needs of young people. But how do you keep out at least the emotional, social aspects of it, if you see spiritual in that respect?
Well, I think the role of the district is to educate students, and what that means is that in the broader context of Judean Christian ethics and values and beliefs, we do subscribe, and our belief statements, our strategic plan talks about the respect for the individual, respecting the dignity of each individual, and helping each person to achieve their maximum potential. I don't see that in contradiction to spiritual needs.
Okay, but as an expression of that.
As an expression of that.
Right.
In the terms of, you know, talking about religious dogma, no, we do not do that, although some of our high schools have specific courses that touch on the Bible as a major piece of literature. We have high school courses that focus on philosophy, that talk about the major philosophies.
Okay, let's talk about that, Eric. Do you recall in your program of having learned things about religion as a result of going to school here?
Yeah, well, in English this year we read the book of Job as literature, you know, that period. And it's a part of my life, so it's a part of everything I do. And you read different things about different cultures and different religions, and religion is a part of a culture. So when you learn about history and those sort of things, religion plays a big part in that. You don't necessarily study it, just the religion, but you study the religion and studying the people.
You can't help but study about religion to understand the culture that we live in and the cultures of the world.
Yes.
You felt that helps you appreciate those cultures?
Oh yeah, it really did. I mean, the United States today is largely a Christian country. I mean, there's a lot of different groups, but our country was founded basis on Christian. The founders were basically Christian white males, and so a lot of our laws based from Christian beliefs. So it's a part of our culture, and it's a part of others.
Okay, would you like to respond to that?
Well, I very much believe that America was founded because of religious freedom. That was clearly part of the thrust of coming to the New World, for a venture for just the New World. But it was also, the 13 colonies were founded because of religious freedom. As well as when you think about American history and you talk about the expansion of the West, you talk about manifest destiny, God, glory, and gold, certainly is a story. And I think Eric is correct that religious issues, religious freedoms are part of American culture. And to not understand that, I think, means that you miss part of this culture.
Well, I think there's been no dispute about that. I know the Supreme Court, when it ruled about the illegality of having mandatory prayers in school, said that that was a practice of religion as distinct from learning about it. And but that line becomes hard to identify sometimes when it's like having prayers at baccalaureate services, and what's the policy of the district in that regard?
The constitutional position, as I understand it, and that the district follows, is that student-initiated and student-led prayers are acceptable at any gathering of students or assemblies.
And you were, just before the show, Eric, you were saying that you, part of your graduation experience last month was on including a baccalaureate service. Tell us about that.
Well, we had it in the gym, and it was PTA and student organized, and it was non-mandatory, and my father spoke, and it was just...
Your father, who is a Lutheran minister, I understand.
Yeah, there you go. You get the plug in. But we had students lead prayers and read scripture, and it was, for me, it was an important part of graduation.
Why was it important?
Because my faith is important to me, and in graduation, which is a big step, going off from what you know into whatever, it's important to feel like you're going with God, and that's...
Well, the transition then in your life, any major transition is inseparable from your faith, and this was an expression of that you were able to share with other graduates in a way that, but not everybody in your class would have gone to that.
No.
I mean, religion wouldn't have been important to some of the other youth as it was to you, and I guess that's the main criteria, that it's not forced. What about the experience where, if you had parents say, even though it's not forced, there's kind of a pressure on their children to participate, to conform? Has that come up in your...
I mean, in terms of baccalaureate services?
Well, that or any place else where there's student-led prayers.
We are very conscious about not making it a mandatory piece and to allow persons to make choices about their participation.
Mm-hmm.
One could probably argue that if you're in an assembly and a student stands up and does a student-initiated prayer, then there is some social pressure to participate in that prayer. But in overall, there is no mandatory rules.
At the commencement service, as distinct from the baccalaureate,
Right.
where there's a larger number and more of an expectation of attendance, whether there's a prayer there?
Many of the high school graduations included an invocation by a student.
Mm-hmm.
That is really the choice of the individual high schools. They set the program for their own graduation and choose who is on the platform and who participates in making any statements to the gathered persons at the microphone. So several of the schools, I attended all of the high schools. All 10 of our high schools did not have an invocation, but I would say, I'm trying to remember, I would say probably half of the schools chose to have a student invocation.
If the prayer was led by a Christian student and you had Buddhists and Jewish and Hindu students out there that were feeling that this was not their expression of faith, how do you reconcile those needs?
Well, again, it is the high school's choice about student-initiated prayer. My memory of the prayers that we heard this last graduation were not specific to a particular denomination or not specific to Jesus Christ.
Okay.
But invoking the words Lord and God, which may be objectionable to some religious groups, but certainly not as objectionable as focusing in on Christianity.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that our society is moving toward is increasing pluralism. And I read recently that there will soon be more Muslims than there are Presbyterians in the country, and that I trust the Lutherans will always maintain a certain numerical advantage, but you know, the numbers are less important than the fact that the tolerance and the openness, and I think this is probably why the Supreme Court had its ruling that, among other things, the Bill of Rights was written the way it was. When we come back, I'd like to have a little bit of a discussion about the way in which the religious right has been a factor in school affairs and school board matters, as well as within the schools itself, and think about that. And when we come back, we'll talk about that, and you folks stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live, but we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627, because serving Austin means serving you.
Welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue, where today we're reflecting upon the Austin Independent School District as it seeks to meet the holistic needs of its students. And Kathy Ryder, president of the board, is with us, and Eric Grunberg, a recent graduate of AISD. Before we took the break, we were talking about baccalaureates as an interface between the district and the religious community, and I need to say that Austin Metropolitan Ministries, which is the sponsor of our program, was also active in working with the district to have a baccalaureate that was available to schools that may not have had it otherwise, or that was in an ecumenical interfaith fashion. And one of the examples of that connection between religious folks and the school people. I'd like also to take note of a couple of programs that have been on national media recently. One, Louis Rukeyser of Wall Street Week decided to do a program on the schools and how they were needing improvement in important ways. And there was a statement that the schools, some of the standards have slipped since there have been focus upon holistic treatment of young people rather than just reading, writing, and arithmetic. Eric, I'd like to get your response to that. Do you feel that schools just should stick to the 3 R's?
I don't think schools can. There are a lot of kids today going to, I've met a lot at Reagan and other schools that have problems beyond learning. They have family problems, they have economic problems, and a school can't ignore it. If a child, you know, if a kid's not eating at home, then how's he going to learn? And the schools need to focus on the whole person and not just the mind, because that's a part of being educated.
And you, I know that you're playing football, or did well at that, and enjoyed that, so that's not just an academic interest either, I mean, for you. How did that, how was that important to you?
Well, football was a major part of my high school career, and it's one of the funnest parts of going to high school. I met a lot of people through it and had a lot of fun playing, and it's all a part of growing up, and that's unique about American society, is playing sports for the school, and you get the school spirit and the rivalries between the different schools. It's all a part of being in school and being educated, being an athlete as well as a student. One's not more important than the other.
Okay, thanks for that sharing of your own experience. What is your view about this holistic model as possibly being overdone or to the expense of the 3 R's?
I don't see that it's at the expense of the 3 R's. I think we must acknowledge that not only has educational systems changed since the 50s and 60s, when some of us were educated, but our population has changed. We cannot afford to not educate our young people. There was a time that young people did not have to have a high school diploma in order to be a constructive, productive member of society. We had a society in which you could go and work on the farms or work in the factories, work in jobs that were very important to our economy and to our overall society, but they did not require a high school diploma. That is not true now. So we must be able to build, I believe, on the diversity of our population. And I believe strongly that public school system is the foundation of democracy in this country, and that the country and the world who figures out how to tap into its most valuable resource, i.e. its people, is the country that will remain or be the economic and world leader on all issues.
Okay, so that it's not the same as it was before, because people have to stay in school longer to prepare themselves in this global economy. They have to in terms of participating in a democracy in new ways as those challenges come along. What about things like the fact, though, that there's so much more in the way of drugs and gangs, and what you hear so much about on television is invading the school? And how do you respond to that kind of threat?
Well, I do think that education has changed in the sense that when I went to school in the 50s, if you did not be successful in the classroom, generally the prevailing thought was it was because the student did not learn. Student did not apply themselves and did not take responsibility. what we're seeing now is that there are many different learning styles, and we must be aware of those. We're also aware that children come to school in different levels of preparation. I expect, although I don't know Eric's family, I expect that Eric had nursery rhymes read to him. I expect that he had bedtime stories read. So Eric was at a different...
We won't ask you to recite any of that.
Appreciate it.
Eric was at a different place when he joined us in kindergarten. When you have young people who've never heard a nursery rhyme, who don't have any printed material in their home, then that means that they come at a different place. It does not mean that their capacity is different. It does not mean that...
But they don't have the same background.
They don't have the same background, and they may not have the same support at home.
Okay.
So you have to look at how do we help young people tap into their ability to learn. And part of that is a sense of well-being, a sense of self-esteem, and I think that's where you move into that holistic being. If you don't come with background help, if you come to school, as Eric said, not having anything to eat, if you come hungry, if you come not sure what clothes you're going to wear, not sure how you're going to interact with other kids.
Right. So you can't help but to deal with people holistically.
I think you have to deal with people holistic, but it doesn't change the focus that our responsibility in the classroom is to help everyone reach their potential and be successful.
It seems to me that the issue, though, in terms of the limited resources that schools have and the fact that the demands are so much greater in so many ways, how the society kind of expects the schools to do all kinds of things that they didn't used to expect schools to do.
That is true.
And is that realistic to expect the schools to meet that variety of needs? And how do you draw limits? And on that global issue, Eric, do you have some observations?
Well, I mean, yeah, schools are expected to do a lot more today. There's a lot more parenting going on, I think, in the schools, teaching kids how to become men or women. I think that sports helps a lot in that. I think that we're expecting a lot for the amount of money that we put into our schools, which is being cut at the same time. But I don't, like I've said before, there's a lot of problems that kids have. But I think in school, at least from my experience in school, it didn't matter who you were or where you came from as long as you were willing to work in the classroom or on the field or wherever. Okay.
Well, I think that the variety of problems that are facing society that kind of get reflected, as you say, the schools are a mirror of that, has a real impact in the religious community as well. As I used earlier in the show, the phrase the religious right, kind of a generic term of people who are looking to the schools to do things differently in some various ways. And the Christian Coalition is probably the one that's most clearly in the public's mind. I saw a feature recently on PBS. It was on the subject of creationism. And it said that of the 16,000 plus school districts in the country, 2,200 of these were had elected a majority by the Christian Coalition to their Board of Education, so that creationism would be taught alongside evolution, and other probably agenda items that they've had would be implemented. And I think that the question about creationism is probably a way to get a fix on that, because one of the rationales on the program was that since the time of the teaching of evolution, then the moral standards have gone down, and the problems that we're experiencing today have come in the wake of that. Now, from that point of view, Kathy, what's your feeling about, you know, the attempt by religious folks to have more input of that sort?
Well, it is the mission of the district to teach and to educate. I don't believe that teaching religion is our role. There is a debate.
Now, the creationists would say that that's the teaching of science.
Well, you can teach creationism as a theory, just like we teach all other scientific theories. I personally do not see a contradiction between the theory of evolution and that God created the world. I'm not asking other people to share that belief. It is still the mission of the district to teach science and to prepare students to understand the culture, to understand their religion, to understand science and mathematics, to be able to go out into this world and apply their skills and go on to further education after high school, whether that be in the workplace or in college or military or high-tech industries. What concerns me is that sometimes we have seen folks come before our school board and I think be disrespectful and intolerant of everybody's viewpoints. That we must understand that we are not a place of religion, although religious people are certainly, you can't have 75,000 students and 8,500 employees and not say that we are not also a mirror of the religious community.
Right. So the issue becomes, with that range of religious groupings and interests and so on, the need to not just be responsive to one particular segment. That needs to be balanced against other needs as well as what your legal requirements are.
Right.
Did you want to add anything about the issue of creationism as a kind of a
It's
issue?
like what she said, but the people who, evolution is a theory, just like creationism is a theory. If you want to look at it from a school standpoint, I believe in that God created the world. I don't know if 7 days was 7 days, 24-hour days. And people who teach creationism as fact or evolution as fact are limiting themselves and are limiting their own education.
They interviewed Stephen Gould at Harvard, the biologist there, saying that evolution was by far and away the one accepted science by people around the world. And I have to say to you that give us a little bit of sense of your future here, Eric, in that context.
Well, I might have an argument with it. No, evolution...
After you graduated, what's your next step?
Well, I'm going to go to Harvard.
That's what I was thinking you were going to say. And what do you hope to do there?
I'm not sure yet.
Still finding your way.
Yeah, I'm thinking about majoring in chemistry.
We want to thank you for finding your way here today, Eric Greinberg. Kathy Ryder, as president of the district, it's really been a pleasure to have you share your insights with us.
Well, thank you for asking us.
And we'd like to thank you folks for looking in today on Austin Faith Dialogue, and hope you'll be back again next week. I'm Richard Thompson, and peace be with you.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.